what is the ascendant in Vladimir Putin's astrological chart. You can verify that on Wikipedia if you wish. October 7, 1952 in Leningrad. But we are interested in being able to determine an ascendant. We do not know the time of birth, nor does there exist, as far as I have been able to research on the internet or in Russia, any record of his birth time. We have the date, we have the place of birth. We need to find at least the ascendant. If we find the ascendant, we will already have quite a bit of information about this important figure in current international politics, about the situation of the prevailing system in our world today. So how are we going to find Vladimir Putin's ascendant? For this, we have information that will be very useful to us. We will start from the following. There are some important facts about Putin. Let's go here, for example. Putin has a very well-known characteristic, and it's very good at martial arts, especially in Sambo, in Judo. And he also has many things that Vladimir Putin likes that have to do with Mars, with the energy of Mars. For example, you can search for Putin airplane, Putin piloting an airplane. You can see there, Putin pilots a plane to put out fires in Russia. Putin has also driven a Formula 1 car before. And in that sense, we have also seen, we have found information about Putin hunting. He has many photos in which he hunts. There we have Putin in Formula 1, Putin hunting. That is, there is a strong presence, obvious, very evident in Vladimir Putin's chart that tells us about the presence of Mars. Or a sign of Mars. So we have there that Putin's ascendant must be linked to Mars. Or some sign of Mars. Mars must in the ascendant, or Mars must be with the ruler of the ascendant. There are some limited possibilities there. So this detail of a person who has that very marked characteristic in their personality. Sports practices that involve a lot of movement, a lot of energy, the connection with machines, the fact of having been in the KGB, and therefore knowing how to handle weapons and all that subject. That leads us to being able to start ruling out signs that will not be Putin's ascendant with total clarity, with total certainty. Which signs are we going to rule out? We will see next. We can rule out, I would say quickly, the ascendant Capricorn. Putin could not be an ascendant Capricorn. Why? Because if Putin were a Capricorn rising, then Saturn would be the ruler of the first house. That is, it would be the first house. The ruler of the ascendant would be Saturn. And Saturn would be with the Sun in the sign of Virgo. This Saturn-Sun conjunction is very close. They are only 3 degrees apart, which will cause Saturn, right from the start, a Saturn ascendant is not very agile. It is not very prone to sports activities like those Putin does. Second, the Sun is causing a combustion to Saturn and is also in an Earth sign. Forget it. There is neither air nor fire element in terms of the sign. And furthermore, Saturn is falling into combustion by the Sun. So that doesn't it matches, it's remotely close, it's very far from what Putin manifests in his basic personality, from what we've explained. So we rule out Capricorn Ascendant. It's not going to be Capricorn Ascendant. Then it's also not going to be Aquarius Ascendant. Why wouldn't it be Aquarius Ascendant? Because again, in Aquarius, the ruler, Lagna, the ruler of the Ascendant would be Saturn. Therefore, Putin would have to be Saturn, and again, the same effect occurs. And in this case, it's worse, because in the case of Capricorn, this house would be the 9th house. Okay, this house would be the 9th house, but in the case of Aquarius, this house would be the 8th house. Therefore, it's more negative. How about this person born with an Aquarius rising dedicating themselves to sports or... No, it doesn't match at all. Those two rising signs have no business being there. So we've quickly eliminated 2 signs. We still have 10 signs left. We only need to end up with 1 sign. Okay, let's continue. What other rising signs can we quickly eliminate? What other rising signs? What other rising signs can we quickly eliminate? If we eliminated Saturn because of this issue with the Sun, we can do the same with the Leo rising. Right. Let's change the color. Let's put a little orange here. So the same theme with the Leo Ascendant. If it were a Leo Ascendant, then the Sun would be Putin. Putin would be the Sun, and there is a conflict with Saturn. That Saturn is going to slow him down. It's going to limit him. It's not going to allow the Sun to carry out all those activities that Putin actually performs. So this Leo Ascendant also doesn't match what we see regarding Putin and his capabilities, martial arts, his boldness, or his connection with machines, or the issue of energy. That's not the issue he has, right? So it's not there. It's not Leo Ascendant. Okay? What else are we going to eliminate? We are obviously also going to eliminate Libra Ascendant. Why are we going to eliminate Libra Ascendant? We are going to clarify this. We are going to clarify. We have eliminated. Let's indicate what we are eliminating. Which clearly here. This. We have eliminated Aquarius, Capricorn. We have eliminated Leo. And now I was saying Putin cannot be a Libra Ascendant because he has 2 very feminine planets here. The very feminine planet Venus in Libra, Mercury next to Venus, and the aspect of Jupiter opposite here. And that doesn't say much about a person who is, like Putin, very involved in more Mars-related matters, right? This is very feminine, rather. This would rather make him very delicate, very refined. Well, right? Forget it. He would have nothing to do there with what we see regarding Putin. This person would not get into practicing martial arts, right? He could be very good in fashion matters, in things more related to feminine aspects. Because of that, Venus so well placed in Libra. So Putin is not a Libra Ascendant either, right? Ruled out. If he is not a Libra Ascendant, then he is not going to be a Taurus Ascendant, because the Taurus Ascendant also has the same ruler Venus. Therefore, it would be the same issue, and here it would be worse because the moon would be exalted in Taurus. So if we have an exalted moon there, then let's say the feminine predominates much more with the Taurus Ascendant. The feminine predominates more with a Taurus Ascendant. Therefore, it doesn't align, it doesn't match what we've seen about Putin, who has more of a Mars influence and influence of fire signs. Got it. So with that, we are already eliminating 7 signs, and we must continue moving forward. Okay? If we had talked about Saturn and the Sun as a problem, we are going to eliminate Virgo as a possible ascendant. Why? Because if Virgo were Putin's ascendant, then that would lead us to Mercury being Putin. Mercury, the ruler of Lagna, is Putin, and Mercury is with Venus, and again the issue of the feminine. And additionally, you would have Saturn's Sun in conflict here, which doesn't say anything about a person who is dedicated to sports, who practices judo, who flies planes, who gets into tanks, who handles weapons. There's nothing for the ascendant Virgo to do. So we're also going to eliminate Virgo as a possible ascendant. So far we've eliminated 6 ascendants. We still have 6 left. What else? If we've eliminated the ascendant Virgo, we can also eliminate the ascendant Gemini. Why are we going to eliminate it? Because the ruler of Gemini is also Mercury, and the same principle we applied about Virgo applies. Mercury is with Venus, a very feminine planet. It doesn't match someone who is dedicated to more Mars-like matters. So up to that point, we've also eliminated Gemini. What would we say about the moon then? Of Cancer, the sign of Cancer could be Putin's ascendant. What do you think? Of course, we're going to rule that out too. Why? Because the ruler of Cancer is the moon, and the moon is very clearly defined as feminine, this moon. And there is no concrete influence from Mars or a fire sign on this moon. It's true that Mars aspects the ascendant, but that aspect is too weak to come close. That is, to generate a character like the one we explained about Putin. Nor does this Cancer ascendant give him the strength to manifest what Putin manifests. Up to this point, we have already eliminated it, so we are left with only 4 signs to determine which is Putin's ascendant. Well, we are progressing quickly, and I hope you agree with me in what we are doing. And if not, you also have the option to comment or indicate your doubts or opposition to what I am doing. Okay, let's continue. Could we now look at this Pisces ascendant? Could we eliminate this Pisces ascendant? Let's see what you think. The ruler of Pisces, if it were the Pisces ascendant, the ruler would be Jupiter, and Jupiter is in a fire sign. Right, this Aries is a fire sign, Jupiter is in a fire sign, and Jupiter has an aspect here from Venus, has an aspect from Mercury. Which again gives it a bit more of that feminine side, that feminine energy, and this Jupiter aspects Mars. But apart from the sign of Aries, Jupiter is not aligned. It is feeding a lot of the energy of Mars. It aspects Mars, but it's not that Mars aspects Jupiter. What we do have is that Mars aspects Pisces. The problem is that Pisces is still a very watery sign, right? I mean, here there is a water sign, Pisces is a water sign, and rather we would have a person with a contradiction because their basic nature would be water, and they are going towards fire. There is a contradiction that is not going to allow the generation of a person like the one we have seen, like the one we see. Besides, Jupiter receives aspect from Venus and Mercury, which again increases the water theme, right? Venus has a lot of water, so their Jupiter is also water. Venus is water, the ascendant is water. Even though Mars aspects Pisces, it is not so decisive. As to say that this Pisces ascendant is going to generate Putin's personality, as far as the little we have indicated only, which is the starting point of the analysis. We also rule out the Pisces ascendant, okay? So we would only be left with, let's start erasing this so we can continue working. We would be left with only 3 ascendants, 3 possible ascendants. 3 signs as possible ascendants: Aries, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. Which of them is Vladimir Putin's ascendant? Let's start with Aries. Aries, a fire sign. Aries is classically the sign that produces a sporty person, a warrior-like person, someone who joins the armed forces, competitive. And here in this Aries sign we have Jupiter. But what interests us is knowing how Mars, the ruler of Aries, is positioned. Mars is located here in the house in Sagittarius, which is a fire sign. Look closely, we have the Ascendant in fire, the ruler of the Ascendant in fire. There is a very good integration of fire with fire. Therefore, this person has a lot of energy, a strong connection with Mars. And up to that point, it says it very well. Up to that point, it aligns very well with what we have expressed. Now, one could point out that this would make them very impulsive because they are Aries rising, Mars in fire. In Sagittarius, could be a somewhat impulsive person. They wouldn't fully control themselves. But remember that Jupiter is present there. Jupiter is present in Aries and they are exchanging signs. That is, Jupiter has gone to the sign of Aries, the sign of Mars, and Mars has gone to the sign of Jupiter in Sagittarius. This exchange, this Parivartan yoga, looks very good and very interesting and aligns quite well with what Vladimir Putin expresses, right? That is, he is involved in sports, in machinery, but it's not like he is so impulsive in those practices. That is, he handles them with a certain low profile, we would say, right? It's not his main dedication, we would say, right? Here we would indeed have a person very dedicated to that, to sports, very involved on the topic of sports, but there's a lot to say up to that point. It's an important possibility that we're going to take into account. So one possibility before, I'm not going to say yet that Aries is the Ascendant because I have to evaluate the other two that are missing. So let's look at the other two signs to see if they also give us some list, some vision, right? This Ascendant could be, I'll put a check. Now let's go with the Ascendant. Let's go with Scorpio. Scorpio as the Ascendant. Does it match or not? If Scorpio were Putin's Ascendant, then we're talking about a water sign. And the ruler of Scorpio would be Mars, which is in the 12th house. Mars would be in the 12th house in a fire sign, and Mars... Sorry, it's not the 12th house, it would be the 2nd house. The 2nd house is this one. Mars would be in the 2nd house in a fire sign. Again, we have the problem of the contradiction from water to fire. Very different from what we had seen here from fire to fire. And right? Besides, we see that the moon is aspecting the sign of Scorpio. An exalted moon with great strength aspects the sign of Scorpio, okay? This position of Mars in Sagittarius in the 2nd house is not strong enough, it is not solid enough. Because remember, we are going from water to fire, therefore I don't see it aligning much with Putin's, right? It has a small impulse, but it gets ruined from there because the Ascendant is Scorpio, right? And again, Scorpio Ascendants are somewhat more impulsive than the personality Putin displays, which is much more controlled, let's say much calmer, right? So we are going to eliminate the Scorpio Ascendant. We will not consider it as a valid option. This Ascendant, this Scorpio sign as the Ascendant. So we are left finally to analyze the sign of Sagittarius. Ta-tam, ta-ta-tam. Let's see, what does Sagittarius tell us? If the Ascendant were Sagittarius, we would have that the ruler of Sagittarius is none other than Jupiter. And Jupiter is in Aries, a fire sign, right? Sagittarius. The ruler is moving to a fire sign in Aries. And there it is, let's say, connecting with fire, with energy, with the fire energy. And up to that point, we would say it has, let's say, there is a good fire interaction. Jupiter enters Aries and can take advantage of that fire energy. But up to that point, I wouldn't say that Jupiter in Aries is enough to lead it to, let's say, to what it is in practice, right? To all those activities that he performs. However, don't forget that Mars is in Sagittarius, right? Don't forget that Mars, the ruler of Aries, is in Sagittarius. Remember that there was an exchange, a Parabartan yoga between Mars and Jupiter. Mars, ruler of the fifth in the first house, Jupiter, ruler of the first in the fifth house. That combination, that interaction of planets does also speak very well. It will explain very well, it will coincide very well with Vladimir Putin and his characteristics and his connection with judo, connection with weapons, with piloting planes, hunting. All those qualities, those characteristics will also apply very well with this Mars-Jupiter connection with Sagittarius Ascendant. So up to that point, we have two ascendants that fit well with what we have analyzed, with what we have considered, with what we have taken as a reference to start ruling out. That has been, let's say, the first topic we have addressed, to rule out the ascendants, to rule out the signs, right? We are left then with only two signs. Let's erase this. And let's indicate now that we are left with ascendant, with the sign of Aries and with the sign of Sagittarius. One of the two signs must be Putin's ascendant. Which of the two will it be? We have to go to another important detail of his life and know and rule out, let's say, one of the two. And for this second part, let's go to Wikipedia and go to the part that says personal life, family, about Vladimir Putin. And we are going to find this key information, it says, which tells us that Putin and his wife they have two daughters. Note, it doesn't say sons, it says daughters. He has Maria Putina, one of his daughters, and Yekaterina Putina, she is the other daughter, right? Maria and Yekaterina, they are his two daughters. Okay? So he has two daughters. Let's go back then to the astrological chart to confirm that data. If he has two daughters, that means that the fifth house, which relates to children, must have a feminine influence. It must have a significant feminine influence, the fifth house. Okay? Let's see then, first with the Aries ascendant. Aries ascendant, where does the fifth house fall? House 5 falls 4-5. House 5, ready. And where does house 5 fall? It's already here. Who is the ruler of house 5? The ruler of house 5 is the sun. The sun, because it rules house 5, Leo. Ruler of house 5. The ruler of house 5, and the sun is located in what would be house 6, and the sun is with Saturn in house 6. This sun has problems with Saturn, it's not very well. That is a fire sign which tends more toward a male child. The sun is a masculine planet and Saturn is a planet that tends to block the birth of children or children in general. In this case, because the sun rules house 5, I don't see here with this Aries ascendant the possibility that Putin had. That is, it doesn't give him ease in having children, it blocks the possibility of having children. Furthermore, we see that there are no favorable feminine aspects toward the sun, toward Saturn, nor toward Leo. Therefore, unfortunately, the sign of Aries here is losing. And he has no resistance regarding daughters. Okay? Let's now see what happens if we analyze everything from the ascendant, from the sign of Sagittarius as the ascendant. Okay? Let's see. Let's delete this. And let's create a new. Let's delete this. Let's look at a new layer and let's see. What would happen if the ascendant is Sagittarius? If the ascendant is Sagittarius, the fifth house, let's change the color. The fifth house will fall. Where will the fifth house fall? The fifth house will fall here. House. If the fifth house falls in Aries, the ruler of Aries is Mars. Okay? Mars goes here to the first house. And Jupiter is in the fifth house. There we have a fire sign, Both signs are of fire. Jupiter in the fifth house. Here we would be talking about male children. Here there would be at least one male child. Isn't that right? Due to the presence of Jupiter and Mars in relation to the fifth house. So far I don't see daughters, but however, we cannot overlook that Venus is in the fifth house. In the 11th house. And Venus is very strong because it is in its own sign. Venus has a lot of strength here. I'm going to put 2 checks. And Venus is aspecting the fifth house. The aspect of Venus in the fifth house is stronger than the presence of Jupiter in the fifth house. Because Jupiter in Aries is not entirely comfortable. On the other hand, Venus's aspect is stronger because it is in its own sign at editing. So Venus aspects well towards the fifth house. And since Venus is together with Mercury, which is a malleable planet that adapts to the planet that is stronger than it, Mercury will take on the femininity, the feminine energy of Venus. Therefore, the combination of Mercury and Venus remains feminine. That is, here we have 2 planets, one clearly strong, femininity, and the other that absorbs the femininity of this Venus. Therefore, both aspects. Of course, Mercury is at 0 degrees. That is, it basically adapts to Venus. Those 2 planets will influence having daughters. More than sons. So, it's clear that there is a female presence for the Sagittarius ascendant. There clearly is female presence regarding having daughters. Now, obviously, there is also the possibility of having a son, which could happen in the future. That is, we cannot rule that out. It could happen in the future. But right now, or who knows, maybe there could be a son hidden somewhere. Well, that's a bit speculative. But what is clear is that the 2 daughters who are born officially recognized as daughters. That birth can be explained through the aspect of Venus added to that of Mercury towards the fifth house, and that also indicates a very good connection between father, because Putin is Jupiter, and the daughters. That is, there is a good interaction between father and daughter, which in practice, according to my research, manifests. That is, Putin and his daughters have always had a good father-daughter relationship, a positive filial relationship. Okay, so there is no problem. So we are reaching a conclusion here. Only with these 2 important details about Putin's life, we are already arriving at Putin's ascendant. What is Putin's ascendant then? Putin's ascendant is Sagittarius. According to these 2 analyses, which are very compelling, 2 very compelling topics, we have reached the conclusion. I have reached the conclusion that Putin's ascendant is Sagittarius, and therefore we already have the order of all the houses here. Okay? So we will know that Putin's 10th house falls here. The 10th house. Why am I focusing on the 10th house? Because the 10th house is the house of political power, and we see that Putin has Saturn in the 10th house and the Sun in the 10th house. Okay? The Sun in the 10th house is a good position for politics. Saturn in the 10th house is not necessarily the best position for political matters. But this Saturn in the 10th house is, let's say, in a comfortable position. Because Saturn in Virgo in a Mercury sign is in a friendly sign. That is, Saturn in Virgo and Saturn in Gemini are in a good position. And in Virgo in particular, it is in a pleasant position in the 10th house. The Sun in the 10th house always shines. But in the sign of Virgo, it is not as strong, let's say. Both, they are in an intermediate situation, each with its own power, with its nature. And in a certain conflict, right? Because the Sun is causing combustion to Saturn. That is, in any case, the Sun and Saturn here have a conflict that occurs in the 10th house. That is the theme of power seen only by Saturn and the Sun. We have certain conflicts there, certain confrontation, right, between the Sun and Saturn. Now, don't forget that the Sun and Saturn are visitors to the 10th house. They are visiting the 10th house. The true ruler of the 10th house is Mercury. And Mercury is in the 11th house with Venus. So Mercury as the ruler of the 10th is in a way better off. Then Saturn and the Sun are in the 10th house. Therefore the 10th house actually expands. It doesn't remain only in the 10th, but expands towards the 11th house. The 10th and 11th houses are very connected in Putin. The ruler of the 10th in the 11th. The 11th house is very strong. The 11th house is well positioned. And the 10th house has two planets that bring contributions, but also confrontation. Okay? Remember that Saturn, in this case with Sagittarius rising, Saturn rules the 2nd house. The house of economic power. The 3rd house, the house of legal power. All matters related to legal issues, documents, archive. And well, Putin had a lot of work in that regard. Putin had work related to information. Information as his work in the KGB. And this Virgo sign ruled by Mercury also relates to information. The Sun represents, in this case, rules the 9th house. The Sun rules the 9th house. And this Sun comes from here, from the 9th house in Leo. And it joins in the 10th house. You have to have, come on, you have to look at the details. Don't get dizzy. The details are important here. This 10th house is very curious. Putin's 10th house is very curious because it has the ruler of the 9th. Slight. Having the ruler of the 9th in the 10th house is a certain type of Raja Yoga. Mild. In this case, it's a bit mild because the Sun isn't very strong, but the ruler of the 9th in the 10th is good for matters of political power. The ruler of the 2nd and 3rd in the 10th is also good for all aspects of financial management and all that pertains to legal management, which is obviously key in matters of power. Political power relies on economic power and also on the power to enact laws, to establish norms. Let's say the part of the rule of law, which is based on legality. So Saturn brings those two themes. The Sun brings the theme of the 9th. The 9th house relates to the figure of authority, the figure of a leader. The 9th house, the figure of the father of the nation. So their Saturn and the Sun are bringing positive things to the 10th house. Although between themselves there are certain clashes. Now that Sun in the 10th house can also represent certain groups, a certain power group. a certain power elite that supports him. A certain part of, let's say, these people, these men of power in Russia who could be businessmen, etc., would be supporting him because the ruler of the ninth is in the 10th. But also another group would confront him a bit because the sun is in conflict with Saturn. That is, there are two tendencies. That sun carries two tendencies. On one hand, the support of certain important people in Russia who could be authorities, who could be people from the political sphere who support Putin regarding his political issue, how he is advancing in terms of access to political power. But also that sun represents people who are damaging other aspects or who generate certain confrontation with what he wants to do it economically, legally, so there is a clash there, not between the management of economic power that Putin exercises and a certain group or certain elite of powerful individuals in Russia who disagree with that economic management, and so there is a mix in that Saturn Sun, a very interesting mix that if one analyzes it, the history of Russia in relation to Putin and his governments, one will realize it aligns quite well because Putin has had problems with important Russian businessmen, even deported some of them, put them on trial, prosecuted them legally. But Putin also has in Russia certain other figures of economic power who support him. So there is a confrontation there, quite strong in that sense, which is expressed in this Saturn Sun, yet also this Mercury with Venus indicates that ability Putin has to make friends or allies to be able to, let's say, he has a communicative side that speaks well regarding political management, not political management. And the management of information and the management of, let's say, his contacts, because the 11th house has much to do with his contacts at a political level. So we see that the three houses are connected, the 9th house, the 10th house, and the 11th house. The three houses are connected. That already explains a bit why Vladimir Putin becomes the president of one of the powers, well, of a power, an important military power in the world that at some point, well, when he began, Russia was surely very down after Boris Yeltsin. Russia was very bad economically, bad militarily, but Putin has been moving Russia forward. To a new level. He has returned Russia to being a military power again, and politically is also intervening a lot at a global level, especially in the most acute conflicts like Syria, Iran, and currently in Ukraine. So there we have this analysis, this interesting analysis. Remember that Jupiter, which is Putin aspects. The 11th house aspects the 5th house and aspects its own ascendant, that Jupiter is not isolated, that Jupiter connects with Venus, Mercury, it aspects the 9th house and also aspects Mars itself. So here there is also a certain Raja Yoga, because Mars goes to the 1st, there is an exchange between the 1st and the 5th. Where there is also an aspect towards Mars and towards the 1st house. Therefore, the 1st house is very strong, very stable. So this aligns very well with Putin's personality. So there we have, up to there we have already confirmed Putin's ascendant. We don't have the time, but then we can indicate between what range of time he would have. being born Putin, because we only have to check what time range this Sagittarius ascendant covers, that we can see in the same program. Okay. Here in this Sirius T-star program, we can calculate that detail of from what hour to what hour this would be the possibility of that ascendant. Of that Sagittarius ascendant. So more or less the Sagittarius ascendant begins at 2:40 in the afternoon, that is 2:40 in the afternoon, and that Sagittarius ascendant ends at more or less 425 in the afternoon, that is between 2:40 p.m. and 4:25 p.m. in that average time. In that time span is birth time of Putin. That would be my conclusion up to this point. Between 2:40 and 4:25 in the afternoon, Vladimir Putin would have been born in Leningrad in Russia. Well, I'll stop here. There is much more to talk about regarding Putin, and this first video is only to begin this topic of Putin's astrological chart. There are many interesting things to see. Regarding Putin's first and second governments, we is a lot to analyze there, and I will be presenting that in the following videos. But for today, I'll stop here, and I would be aware of your comments, your questions, let's say, if you want to challenge what I have analyzed here, if you have arguments against the analysis I have done, I would also like you to present them. Let's see if they have any. It makes sense. Maybe there are details I am not taking into account, but as far as I understand Vedic astrology, it is clear to me that Putin's ascendant is Sagittarius. Okay, so we are in touch.